laughed at him for being old, but in seconds, silence fell, because history had just walked into their gym. The black belts thought it would be funny to test the quiet old man who sat at the edge of the mat. "Hey, sir, want to show us a move?" One of them joked, drawing laughter from the group. His name was Thomas Hale, 62 years old, dressed in plain slacks and a worn jacket. Most thought he was just another retired worker killing time. But the way he rose from his chair, the stillness in his eyes, carried a weight no one in that gym could recognize. What followed that night would leave them silent and change them forever. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. A man no one noticed was about to remind them all what silence can hold. The martial arts school in Cedar Falls was full that Saturday morning. Parents sat on folding chairs along the wall, watching their children train. At the far end of the mat, a group of young black belts had gathered, laughing between drills. Their voices carried. By the entrance, an older man leaned quietly against the wall. His name was Thomas Hale, 61 years old. Gray hair close-cropped, his frame lean but not frail. He wore a plain flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans, boots scuffed from years of use. To most, he looked like any tired grandfather waiting for a ride home. "Hey, old-timer," one of the younger men called, grinning as he gestured. His name was Ryan Briggs, 23, black belt tied too tight, uniform crisp and spotless. "You here to sign up? Or just watching the kids?" His friends chuckled. Thomas didn't answer. He only gave a polite nod, folding his hands in front of him. "Careful," another joked. "He might be here to show us how it was done back in the war." Laughter followed, careless, sharp. The parents in the chairs smiled nervously, not wanting to get involved. Thomas shifted slightly, eyes calm. He didn't smile, didn't frown. Just quiet stillness. Ryan smirked. "Tell you what, why don't you come out here? Show us a move or two. We could use the entertainment." His friends laughed louder, clapping each other on the back. The air in the room changed, but only slightly. Some of the older parents looked away, embarrassed by the mockery. A few teenagers nudged each other, waiting to see what would happen. Thomas's left hand brushed the edge of his sleeve. There, just beneath the cuff, was a faded scar. Long, straight, pale against weathered skin. He adjusted the cuff, covering it again. He spoke at last, voice low, steady. "No need for that. Nothing more." Ryan spread his arms wide. "Come on, sir. Just a little fun. We'll go easy on you." The last words carried a sting. Thomas looked at the mat. Then he looked at Ryan. His eyes lingered just a moment too long. The laughter thinned, though no one could have said why. And then he lowered his gaze again, silent as stone. The students returned to their drills, but their glances kept slipping back toward the old man at the wall. Something in his stillness unsettled them. The moment had passed, or so they thought. Thomas shifted his weight just slightly, one boot heel clicking against the floor. It was a small sound, but it carried, sharp in the quiet hall. The black belts glanced at each other, uneasy now. They hadn't expected silence to feel heavier than words. And Thomas remained against the wall, eyes lowered, but not in submission. Not in the least. The next drill ended, and the younger black belts gathered near the center of the mat. Their chatter grew louder, deliberate, as though to draw the old man back into their game. Ryan wiped his forehead with his sleeve, grinning at his friends. "He's tough, though." Didn't even flinch. "You sure you're not secretly training somewhere, sir?" His voice dripped with mock respect. Thomas met his eyes for a brief second, then looked away again. His silence carried more weight than the insult. He clasped his hands loosely behind his back, shoulders straight but unforced. The gym's head instructor, Master Alvarez, was adjusting a child's belt near the edge of the mat. He didn't interfere, though his gaze flicked once toward Thomas, then back to his work. He had seen men like this before, men who said little, but carried something invisible. "Seriously," Ryan continued, pacing in front of the crowd now. "Let's put it to the test. One round. I'll even promise not to break a hip." His friends roared with laughter. Parents shifted uneasily. One mother, seated in the corner, whispered to her husband, "That's not right." He shook his head quietly, urging her not to get involved. Thomas inhaled slowly, steady as a tide rolling in. He let it out, his expression calm. His eyes traveled across the mat, then down to the floor before him. No one noticed how balanced his stance was, how his weight shifted with quiet precision, how his hands, though still, were always ready. Ryan pressed again. "What do you say, sir? Don't tell me you're afraid." He smiled, but the smile looked thinner now. Forced. Thomas finally raised his head. His eyes, pale gray and steady, met Ryan's. The room went quiet for the briefest moment. Then, with the faintest tilt of his chin, Thomas looked away once more. It wasn't surrender. It was something else. And that something unsettled Ryan far more than he admitted. The laughter from the group faltered, though no one said why. They returned half-heartedly to their drills, yet each time their eyes wandered back toward the man at the wall. He stood with the ease of someone who had been waiting all his life for moments exactly like this. Nothing more was spoken, but the stillness had shifted. Something had begun. The class rolled forward. Kicks snapped through the air. Mats thudded beneath takedowns. Yet, in every corner of the room, attention drifted back to the silent figure by the wall. Thomas Hale had not moved. His arms still folded gently behind his back, shoulders neither tense nor slack. He stood as though every inch of his body knew exactly where it belonged. Master Alvarez called for a water break. The students scattered to bottles and benches. Ryan lingered, smirking, throwing glances toward the old man. "Still here?" he said, tone sharp enough for all to hear. Thomas gave a small nod. Nothing more. Ryan frowned. He had expected a reply, maybe a nervous chuckle. Instead, he got silence. One of the younger belts, a tall boy named Marcus with restless energy, nudged Ryan. "Maybe he can't hear you." He grinned. Old folks, right? Their friends laughed again, though quieter now. Thomas's eyes moved once toward the boy, then back to the mat. No anger, no humor, only stillness, calm as stone weathered by years of wind. Ryan stepped closer. "You watching, old man? Taking notes? Or just reliving the glory days?" The words hit something, but not on Thomas's face. Deep inside, a flicker stirred, dust swept from a memory long hidden. The smell of salt water, the whine of rotors overhead, sand-stinging eyes, a voice on a radio calling his name. He blinked once, and the gym returned. Children laughing, students chatting. He pulled his sleeve down again. Beneath the fabric, the scar burned with memory. Master Alvarez called the class back. Pairs. Grappling. The room bustled once more. Thomas shifted his weight, just slightly, boots making no sound against the floor. His eyes lingered on the mats. He studied every movement, every grip, every flaw. To the others, it seemed idle watching. But to him, it was instinct, assessment, calculation. He could see where balance broke, where strength collapsed, where fear bloomed in hesitation. Ryan threw a glance his way mid-grapple, as though daring him silently. Thomas did not move, but his hand brushed his pocket, where a small piece of worn metal lay hidden. A dog tag. Edges dulled, numbers faded. It had not left his pocket in 20 years. His fingers touched it now, not for show, but for grounding. A reminder. The laughter swelled again on the mat, but the tone had changed. There was an edge of unease beneath it, and the old man stood, calm, immovable, as though waiting. Ryan and Marcus paired together, eager to show off. Their movements were fast, but sloppy beneath the polish. They slammed into the mat with a flourish, earning chuckles from the crowd of younger belts. Thomas watched. His eyes narrowed only slightly. Every pivot, every shift of weight, he tracked. His mind wasn't in the gym. It was in a dusty courtyard half a world away, where he had once read movements the same way, but with lives on the line. Ryan pinned Marcus, grinning, playing to the room. "See that?" he said loudly, eyes flicking toward Thomas. Would have snapped a shoulder right there. He laughed as though his own skill were unquestionable. For the first time, Thomas moved from the wall. He stepped forward, quiet, steady. A few parents glanced up. One mother whispered, "Is he going out there?" He stopped short of the mat, boots planted evenly, and spoke softly. "Your elbows open." Ryan frowned. "What?" Thomas's voice was calm, almost absent. "You left your arm unguarded." He could have broken free. Before Ryan could respond, Marcus, grinning mischievously, tried exactly that. A small twist, a quick jerk. Ryan lost balance. In seconds, he was on his back, pinned by the very boy he'd been boasting over. The gym erupted in laughter, but not at Thomas this time. At Ryan. Ryan scrambled up, red-faced, snapping, lucky shot. But his eyes slid back to Thomas, unsettled. It hadn't been luck. Parents whispered now, glancing at the quiet man who had spoken only one sentence. Children tilted their heads, watching him more than the sparring. Master Alvarez's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Thomas returned to the wall. He folded his hands again, posture unshaken. The dog tag pressed lightly in his pocket, warm against his palm. Inside, something long dormant stirred awake. Not pride, not anger. Something simpler. Precision. The gym was no longer laughing quite the same way. The game had changed, though few yet knew how. And the old man had spoken. Just once. But it was enough to shift the room. The laughter that followed Ryan's stumble was quick to rise, but quicker still to fade. Something about the way Thomas had spoken, quiet, almost reluctant, hung in the air. Parents exchanged looks. Some smiled faintly, though they didn't know why. Others seemed uneasy, as though an invisible line had been crossed. Ryan, flushed, returned to the sparring circle with Marcus. He moved harder now, sharper, trying to recover dignity. His strikes carried more force than control. Each thud of body against mat echoed louder than before. But not everyone's eyes were on Ryan anymore. Near the benches, a boy of 14 sat watching, arms folded across his chest. His name was Daniel, a student still new to the school. His mother had brought him here to learn focus, not to fight. Daniel had been quiet all morning. But now, his gaze kept drifting toward the older man by the wall. "Mom," he whispered. He saw it. Before it happened. His mother frowned. Saw what? The move. Ryan's mistake. He said it. Then Marcus flipped him. Just like that. His mother didn't answer, but her eyes lingered on Thomas for a moment longer than before. On the mat, Ryan grunted, twisting into another throw. Marcus hit hard, breath whooshing from his chest. The other black belts cheered him on, eager to bury the moment of humiliation. But the noise sounded thinner now. Forced. Master Alvarez clapped his hands. Switch partners. His voice was even, though his eyes glanced toward the old man before flicking away. He had taught long enough to know when something subtle was at work in a room. Thomas shifted slightly against the wall. Not much, just enough to straighten his shoulders. The flannel shirt moved against the outline of lean muscle still firm beneath the years. His boots adjusted their angle on the wood floor, balanced, ready. Most saw nothing in it. But Daniel did. His brow furrowed, like a boy sensing a storm before the sky darkened. A father in the corner muttered to his wife, "Why won't the man sit down? If he's just watching, he should sit." But Thomas remained where he was. Upright, balanced, silent. Ryan, paired with another student now, glanced over his shoulder more than once. His smirk faltered each time his eyes met the gray, steady gaze of the old man. There was no mockery there, no amusement, only the calm attention of someone who had measured him and already found the limits. And though no words were spoken, unease crept into the gym like a draft through an open door. The crowd began to notice. The unease grew slowly, like water rising without anyone realizing it. The students kept drilling, pairs tossing and pinning each other, but their glances betrayed them. Eyes flicked toward the old man more often than toward the instructor. Thomas Hale remained by the wall, posture unchanged. To a stranger, he was just waiting. To anyone watching closely, he was measuring, observing with a focus that never wavered. Ryan tried to reclaim the attention. He laughed louder than necessary, slapped his partner on the back after a throw, barked out jokes that sounded brittle in the open air. His friends followed his lead, their laughter echoing too high, too sharp. But the energy no longer filled the room. It scattered. It kept circling back to the quiet figure who said nothing. One of the parents, a retired police officer named Harold, leaned toward the mother beside him. "See the way he stands. Not casual. That's a stance. I've seen it." The mother nodded faintly, not sure what to say. But her eyes lingered too. Across the room, Daniel's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "He's different," he whispered again. His mother shushed him, but her gaze mirrored his. Master Alvarez, standing at the edge of the mat, adjusted his belt slowly. His expression betrayed nothing, but his eyes betrayed curiosity. He had taught for 30 years. He knew what casual observers looked like. He also knew what watchfulness looked like. And Thomas Hale wasn't merely watching. He was reading. The drills moved to counterattacks. Students threw each other harder now, the mat thumping with bodies. Ryan, aggressive as ever, tried to force a show. He looked toward Thomas after each throw, as though daring him silently. But Thomas never reacted. Not with approval, not with judgment, only stillness. His right hand brushed his sleeve again, as though adjusting it. Beneath the fabric, the scar tugged faintly. A reminder, a memory pressed into skin. For the first time, Ryan hesitated mid-move. A fraction of a second, just enough for his partner to slip out and reverse the hold. Ryan slammed down on the mat with a grunt. The students laughed, but not as before. This time, the laughter carried relief. A breaking of tension none of them could name. Ryan sat up, breathing harder, his face darkening. His eyes locked on the old man. And Thomas finally raised his head. The gym grew quieter, almost without anyone realizing. Something had shifted again, and the silence in the room was no longer casual. It was waiting. The gym bustled, but beneath it ran a hush no one admitted aloud. Each sound seemed sharper now. The squeak of bare feet on the mat, the smack of palms slapping down to break a fall, the distant hum of the heater. Yet none of it could cover the weight of the old man's presence. Thomas Hale shifted his boots slightly, just enough to ease pressure on his knees. His gaze swept across the floor again, calm, deliberate. He was not watching sport. He was cataloging, calculating. Ryan forced another throw, grunting as he slammed his partner down. He looked at Thomas again, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. It wasn't amusement anymore. It was challenge, raw and restless. Parents whispered. He hasn't said a word since that correction, one muttered. And yet, it feels like he's in charge of the room. The retired officer, Harold, leaned back in his chair. I've seen men like him. He murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Carried themselves that way. You don't learn it here. You learn it somewhere harder. On the wall, Thomas adjusted the cuff of his sleeve again, exposing the faint edge of the scar before tucking it back. His thumb lingered on the fabric a moment longer than necessary. A memory stirred. The desert, 20 years past. A convoy at dusk, tires grinding over sand. The radio hissing with static before a sudden, sharp voice. Hale on point. He remembered the weight of his rifle, the heat pressing against his neck, the silence before contact. The scar was from that night. A night that ended with men lost and a promise carved into his skin. He blinked, pulling himself back to the gym. To the children, the drills, the laughter that had already thinned. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the worn dog tag again. Cold, heavy, grounding. Ryan caught the motion. His smirk returned, thin, bitter. What's that you keep fiddling with, old man? Nervous tick. He said it loud enough for all to hear. His friends laughed, but their laughter rang hollow. Thomas didn't answer. He didn't even look at Ryan. He simply tucked his hand away again, shoulders square, gaze calm. But Daniel, the boy on the bench, leaned forward. He had seen the glint of metal. He had seen the way Thomas's hand touched it. Not like a nervous habit, but like a ritual. Respectful. Heavy. And though Daniel didn't yet understand, he knew. That tag wasn't decoration. It was history. And the man who carried it was more than he appeared. Ryan's jab about the dog tag drew a few uneasy chuckles, but even his closest friends avoided meeting his eyes. The sound died quickly, swallowed by the heavy quiet that followed. Thomas remained still, his hand brushing the pocket once more before falling back to his side. His face revealed nothing, yet his silence seemed louder than any retort could have been. On the bench, young Daniel kept staring. His mother touched his shoulder. Don't stare, Daniel. He's not like them, the boy whispered. He doesn't need to shout. Meanwhile, Harold, the retired officer, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He studied Thomas with the sharpened eye of a man who had once read reports, who had once seen faces on wanted sheets or debriefings. He knew posture. He knew scars. And what he saw unsettled him. Master Alvarez called for new drills, balance, restraint, controlled falls. The black belts complied, though Ryan moved with jerks of frustration. He wanted attention back. He wanted to erase the slip of his earlier mistake. But every time he glanced toward the wall, Thomas was there. Calm. Waiting. Inside Thomas, memories pressed harder now. He saw a helicopter's shadow stretching across the mountains. Men crouched in silence, faces smeared with grit, eyes hard. The mission had been simple. Infiltrate. Retrieve. Protect. Only, nothing about it had been simple once it began. He remembered voices cut short. He remembered carrying one of his own, limp in his arms, across a ravine while tracer fire lit the night. He remembered the sharp sting of pain in his forearm where the scar was carved. He remembered returning home with fewer brothers than he left with. The dog tag in his pocket had belonged to one of them. He pressed his hand against it now, steady, grounding himself not in grief, but in respect. Across the mat, Ryan finally snapped. "Why are you even here?" His voice cracked sharper than he intended. The laughter that followed was nervous, not joyful. "You think you know better than us? Just standing there, staring?" The room stilled. No one had expected him to say it aloud. Parents shifted uncomfortably. Some students lowered their eyes. Thomas turned his head, slowly, until his gaze settled on Ryan. His eyes were pale gray, steady as iron. He said nothing, but silence, again, carried more weight than words. Ryan faltered, his stance unsettled for the first time, and the unease in the gym grew deeper. The silence after Ryan's outburst stretched too long. The parents in their chairs fidgeted, avoiding each other's eyes. A few students stopped mid-drill, unsure whether to continue. Even Master Alvarez hesitated before giving the signal to resume. But Thomas didn't speak. He didn't need to. His gaze lingered on Ryan a second longer, then shifted away, slow and deliberate, like a man refusing a fight he could easily win. That small choice carried more sting than any insult. Ryan's smirk twitched, breaking under its own weight. Harold, the retired officer, leaned toward the mother beside him. His voice was low, but not low enough. "That look. I've seen it. In debriefs. Men back from the Gulf. They had that same stillness. Not angry, not scared, just measured." His words carried farther than he intended. A few students nearby heard. One girl whispered to another, "What does he mean?" The room wasn't laughing anymore. Ryan tried to rally. He barked at his partner, slammed him into the mat, and puffed up his chest. But his movements lacked precision. Each slam looked like effort covering unease. And then, when he glanced back, Thomas was still watching. Not gloating, not mocking. Watching. Ryan felt the heat crawl up his neck. At the bench, Daniel tilted his head. "Mom." He doesn't even move, but Ryan keeps losing control. His mother hushed him again, though her own eyes stayed fixed on the old man. Thomas adjusted his sleeve once more. The scar caught the light briefly. Long, pale, and deliberate. A line cut into flesh by more than accident. Marcus noticed. His smile faded. "Ryan," he whispered, nudging his friend, "look." Ryan glanced and caught the glimpse too. The laughter died in his throat. He swallowed, staring at the faint mark before it disappeared under the cuff again. A scar like that wasn't from clumsy work in a kitchen. It told of something sharper, colder, harder, something earned. For the first time, Ryan didn't know what to say. Thomas, silent, pressed his palm to his pocket. The dog tag there pressed back, a weight both painful and steady. He drew no attention to it. Yet those who noticed the gesture, the boy Daniel, the officer Harold, felt something shift in their chest. This was no ordinary man. And though the room did not yet know his name, suspicion had begun to bloom. The air in the gym had thinned, as though everyone was breathing more carefully now. Laughter was gone. What replaced it was curiosity, uneasy and sharp. Master Alvarez clapped his hands again, calling for a change in drill. Reaction training. Quick grips. Break free before the hold sets. He paired students and stepped back, arms folded. Ryan muttered something under his breath, too low for most to hear, and moved into position. He kept glancing toward the wall, toward Thomas. The mockery had slipped from his voice, but the challenge still burned in his eyes. Across the room, Daniel sat forward, elbows on his knees. He barely blinked. Alvarez called for volunteers to demonstrate. No one moved. Then, with a smirk, Ryan raised his hand. "I'll show them," he said. He chose Marcus as his partner and moved to the center of the mat. He looked toward Thomas as he said it. Thomas didn't move. The demonstration began. Marcus reached for Ryan's wrist. Ryan snapped free, quick and flashy, then pinned Marcus in a counterhold. He turned, grinning at the crowd, waiting for applause. It didn't come. Instead, a voice, steady and quiet, drifted across the room. "Your grip's weak." Ryan froze. The words came from Thomas. Before Ryan could react, Marcus shifted just slightly, testing the comment. A twist of his wrist, a step inward. Ryan's hold collapsed. He stumbled, thrown off balance in front of the entire room. Marcus, startled, looked down at his own hand. He hadn't believed it would work until it did. The gym rippled with murmurs. Parents leaned forward. Students whispered. Ryan scrambled upright, red spreading across his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Thomas had not left the wall. He had not moved a step. He only watched with calm, even eyes. Without touching a soul, without stepping onto the mat, the old man had dismantled Ryan's showmanship with a single sentence, and precision truer than years of training. Harold exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slowly. He's no spectator. He's been there. Daniel's eyes shone, wide with realization. Even Alvarez now regarded the old man differently. His brow furrowed, and though he gave no outward sign, the weight of respect had begun to shift. Ryan clenched his fists, furious and humiliated. But behind his anger was something deeper. Fear. Because somewhere inside, he knew. Thomas had seen more than technique. He had seen him. The air in the gym no longer belonged to Ryan. Every move he made now seemed to orbit the silent figure by the wall. The more he tried to control the room, the more attention bled back to Thomas. Ryan's friends felt it too. Marcus rubbed his wrist absent-mindedly, still shaken that one quiet remark had undone Ryan's grip. Another black belt, a stocky young man named Eric, leaned close to Ryan. Don't let him get to you. He's just lucky. But his voice lacked conviction. Ryan stood straighter, jaw tight. His pride had been cut twice in front of everyone. He couldn't let it stand. He turned sharply toward Thomas. Enough games. If you've got something to prove, step out here. Gasps spread through the room. Parents glanced at each other. A few shook their heads. Children fell silent. Thomas didn't move. Not yet. Ryan's eyes narrowed. What's the matter? Afraid. His tone was louder now, straining for dominance. You keep staring, correcting, acting like you know better. Come show us. Master Alvarez raised a hand. Ryan. But Ryan cut him off. With respect, Master, this man thinks he can lecture us. If he wants to speak, let him demonstrate. The words stung with challenge, but also with desperation. Ryan needed this. He needed to reclaim his ground. Thomas inhaled slowly. His shoulders lifted, then settled again, calm as the tide. He stepped forward at last, boots clicking faintly on the floor. The room froze. Even the heating vent's hum seemed to fade. Thomas's gaze swept the mat, then rested on Ryan. His voice came quiet but firm. One round. No more. Ryan smirked, trying to cover his unease. Fine by me. Thomas added. When it's done, you'll apologize. The words were not threat, not anger. They were promise. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Parents leaned forward, some shaking their heads, others whispering. Daniel gripped his knees so tightly his knuckles whitened. Harold exhaled, muttering low, "This boy doesn't know what he's asked for." Master Alvarez watched Thomas step closer to the mat. He did not stop him, not because he approved, but because he saw the inevitability. Some moments could not be contained. Ryan bowed with exaggerated flourish, mocking. Thomas inclined his head slightly, without theater, without performance. And just like that, the agreement was set. The quiet man had accepted the challenge. The mats groaned beneath Ryan's bare feet as he circled, chest puffed, fists loose but cocky. He was 23, strong, fast, brimming with the easy arrogance of youth. To him, this was spectacle, a chance to humiliate the stranger in front of everyone. Thomas Hale stepped onto the mat. His boots made no sound when he crossed the edge and slipped them off. He moved carefully, deliberately, as though measuring the distance of each step. His plain socks, worn thin, looked out of place against the crisp white uniforms of the others. But there was nothing out of place in the way he stood. Balanced. Centered. Ryan chuckled, shaking out his arms. All right, old man. Don't worry, I'll go easy. His friends laughed, too loud, trying to chase away their unease. Thomas didn't answer. He only placed his feet shoulder-width apart, knees soft, shoulders relaxed. His arms hung loosely at his sides, palms open, fingers steady. Not a stance taught here. Not a stance anyone recognized. Eric muttered from the sidelines. What's he doing? That's not guard. But Harold leaned forward, eyes sharp. He knew. He's already set. Ryan lunged forward, testing. A quick feint, a sudden reach for the wrist. But before his fingers could touch skin, Thomas shifted. No force, no struggle, just a precise turn of the body, a slide of the foot. Ryan's hand caught nothing but air. The crowd inhaled as one. Thomas hadn't struck him. hadn't even raised a hand. He simply wasn't where Ryan expected him to be. Ryan froze for half a second, then forced a laugh. Slippery. He reset, trying to mask the sting of failure. Thomas's face remained calm, unreadable. His pale eyes never blinked, never broke contact. Master Alvarez's brow furrowed, his arms folding tighter across his chest. He recognized the movement. Not martial arts for show. Not sport. That was something else. Older, colder. A language of survival. Ryan circled again, the grin on his face thinner now. His chest rose and fell faster. He hadn't been touched, hadn't been thrown, but the balance of the room had shifted. The parents sat forward, silent. The students no longer whispered. Even the smallest children stilled, sensing something they couldn't name. Thomas adjusted his shoulders once more, the faintest roll, the kind a soldier makes when the weight of a pack digs in. He said nothing, but the room now belonged to him, and the tension had risen to its peak. The gym fell into a strange silence. Not complete, but heavy. Even the sound of feet shifting on the mat seemed sharper, louder, cutting through the air. Ryan tried to keep his swagger. He bounced on the balls of his feet, rolling his shoulders, jaw set in a grin that no longer touched his eyes. His bravado was slipping, thread by thread. Thomas Hale stood motionless. No bounce, no wasted energy. His arms still loose at his sides. He looked as if he were waiting, not fighting. Waiting for something inevitable. Ryan lunged again, this time faster, sharper. A sudden jab toward Thomas's chest. Thomas turned a fraction, weight shifting from heel to toe, and Ryan's strike cut empty space. The crowd gasped. Thomas had moved so little, yet Ryan's attack seemed to dissolve against him. Not blocked, not parried, simply gone. Master Alvarez's lips pressed tight. He recognized the truth. Precision born from repetition, thousands of hours, not in gyms, but in places where mistakes cost lives. Ryan reset, more frustrated now. He barked out a laugh, too loud. Not bad. Not bad for your age. His voice cracked on the last word, betraying nerves. Thomas's expression didn't change. His gaze, calm and level, pressed heavier on Ryan than any blow could have. On the sidelines, Daniel gripped his mother's arm. Did you see that? He didn't even touch him. His mother hushed him, but she leaned forward too, eyes wide. Harold muttered, almost reverent, that's training. Real training. You can't fake that. Ryan circled, sweat beading on his brow. He lunged again, feinting high, aiming low. Thomas shifted once more, body tilting with the grace of water slipping past stone. Ryan stumbled, his own force working against him, and only just caught himself before falling. The room grew even quieter. Thomas did not press forward. He did not strike. He only reset his stance, balanced, patient, as though time belonged to him. The silence stretched. Parents stopped breathing. Students froze mid-fidget. For the first time, Ryan felt the weight of it pressing down. This wasn't just an old man. This was someone who had been here before, in far harsher places, against far greater opponents. And every quiet second that passed made that truth louder. Thomas exhaled softly. The calm before the storm was complete. The gym held its breath. Every eye fixed on the two men in the center. Ryan wiped his palms against his uniform pants, pretending it was sweat. He circled wider this time, trying to draw Thomas into movement, into some kind of mistake. His grin wavered, returning in flashes, then fading again as he caught the steady gaze waiting for him. Thomas did not circle. He pivoted with each step Ryan took, quiet, efficient, always facing him. He never let the younger man out of his line of sight. His body moved like a compass needle, calm, precise, always pointing north. A bead of sweat rolled down Ryan's temple. He snorted, covering nerves with noise. You gonna move? Or just stand there like a statue? His tone was sharp, but underneath it lay something tighter. Fear, still buried, but rising. Thomas did not answer. His silence had become its own language. From the benches, parents leaned forward, no longer whispering. The children sat quiet, eyes wide, as though sensing a story they would tell later. Daniel's voice was barely audible, but it carried. He doesn't have to move. He already knows what's coming. Master Alvarez, arms folded, gave no outward sign, but his eyes stayed on Thomas. He saw what the others could not. The weight distribution in the feet, the economy of movement, the absolute absence of waste. He had seen fighters train for decades and never stand like that. Ryan lunged again, throwing a low kick this time, hoping to surprise. Thomas shifted, one step back, light, almost casual. The kick meant nothing. Ryan stumbled forward a half step, forced to catch his balance. Thomas's eyes never wavered. His breathing never quickened. And for the first time, Ryan hesitated before charging back in. The crowd felt it. That hesitation spread across the room like a ripple in still water. Parents exchanged glances. A student muttered, "Why doesn't he just finish it?" Another whispered back, "He doesn't need to." Thomas rolled his shoulders once. The motion was subtle, but it spoke volumes. Not fatigue, not tension, readiness. The gym had shifted entirely now. No one laughed. No one mocked. They were no longer watching a joke. They were watching something they did not yet understand. And in that silence, Ryan realized he wasn't fighting an old man. He was standing in front of something far older, far heavier. And he was out of his depth. The silence stretched until it seemed the walls themselves leaned in to listen. Ryan shifted his weight again, searching for an opening that wasn't there. His chest rose and fell faster than it should have this early in a spar. He masked it with bravado, but every breath betrayed the pressure mounting inside him. Thomas Hale remained still. His arms were loose, but his stance had changed, barely, yet unmistakably. One foot angled, heel light, shoulders softened. It wasn't a karate stance. It wasn't judo. It wasn't anything the gym had drilled into these boys. It was something else. Something older, sharper. Master Alvarez's brows drew tight. He knew that stance. Not exactly, but close enough to sense the origin. Military, not civilian. Ryan lunged again, trying a feint into a sweeping strike. His movement was fast, rehearsed. Yet Thomas shifted a fraction, a pivot so quiet it looked accidental, until Ryan hit the mat, sprawled face first, with nothing but his own momentum to blame. The sound rang out sharp against the quiet room. Gasps rose. Children clutched at their knees. Parents straightened, stunned. Ryan scrambled up quickly, red-faced, brushing at his GI, as if he could wipe away the moment. "Lucky, stumble," he muttered, too low for conviction. But the room had seen. That was the fourth stumble. None of them luck. Harold whispered, his voice shaking with a strange mix of awe and memory. "That man's been trained. Not like these boys. Not like us. Like the kind who don't come back the same." The students glanced toward him, unease in their eyes. Ryan turned back, fists clenched, his laughter now gone. He stared at Thomas as if looking for a weakness, any weakness. Thomas's expression gave him none. Instead, Thomas's eyes softened, almost in pity. He spoke at last. "Stop fighting your own weight. That's what's beating you." The words struck harder than a blow. A simple correction, but one that only came from years of hard-won truth. Ryan's face tightened. He knew, deep inside, that it was right. The crowd grew heavier in their silence. They weren't waiting for strikes anymore. They were waiting for revelation. Thomas adjusted his stance again, this time unmistakable. Balanced. Coiled. Ready. The entire gym seemed to understand at once. The storm had not yet begun, but it was about to. Ryan steadied himself, shaking out his arms as though the small stumble had meant nothing. His eyes darted around the gym, trying to pull laughter back to his side, but no one smiled. The crowd was silent. Too silent. Thomas stood opposite him, shoulders relaxed, gaze steady. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't even defensive. He simply waited, as if this was already over. Ryan lunged. Faster this time. He feinted with his left, spun into a sharp right hook aimed at Thomas's jaw. It was the kind of strike that drew cheers in the gym on normal days. A move for the crowd. But Thomas didn't flinch. His head shifted less than an inch. The fist cut through empty space. Before Ryan's momentum could carry him back upright, Thomas's hand rose, not to strike, but to guide. Two fingers pressed against the back of Ryan's shoulder. A whisper of force. Ryan's body tumbled forward, collapsing onto the mat with a thud. The crowd gasped. Ryan pushed up, furious. Again, he barked, voice cracking. He leapt in with a knee strike. Thomas's hand caught him, open palm, not closed fist, redirecting the attack with precision. Ryan's own leg swept past him, and again he landed hard. The gym had fallen completely silent. Children sat motionless, mouths open. Parents gripped the benches. Even Master Alvarez leaned forward now, his eyes dark, searching, remembering. Ryan rose a third time, but his movements were different now, hesitant, unsteady. He rushed in one more time, desperation in every step. This time, Thomas didn't even move his feet. His torso shifted, subtle. His hand intercepted Ryan's wrist, bent it just so, and in the span of a breath Ryan was pinned, face down on the mat, his arm trapped beneath the quiet weight of experience. No strike, no show, just control. Complete, undeniable control. Ryan froze, chest heaving against the mat. He tried to wrench free, but it was useless. Thomas's grip was firm, unyielding, but not cruel. The gym remained in utter silence. The kind of silence that follows a truth too large to ignore. Thomas released him and stepped back. Ryan rose slowly, confusion and fear mixed across his face. He didn't look at the crowd anymore. He looked only at the man before him, and the room knew. This was no ordinary veteran. This was something else entirely. Ryan pushed himself up slowly, his breath ragged, his GI wrinkled and clinging to his skin with sweat. He stood unsteady, his shoulders heaving, and for the first time since the night began, he looked nothing like a champion. His hands trembled, not with exhaustion alone, but with something else, uncertainty. Thomas hadn't moved from his place. His boots were planted evenly on the mat, his body calm, shoulders loose. He breathed quietly, his gaze steady but not sharp, as if even this moment required no effort. He neither smiled nor gloated. His silence filled the room far louder than any celebration could have. The crowd whispered at first, their voices hushed, broken fragments of disbelief. Did you see how he moved? He didn't even touch him hard, just guided him. That wasn't dojo training. That was something else. The words scattered across the benches like small sparks, but no laughter followed. The children who had giggled earlier now sat stiff and still, their eyes wide. The parents leaned closer to one another, but their whispers faltered, unable to find proper names for what they had just witnessed. Harold's cane tapped softly on the wooden floor as he leaned forward, his face pale with recognition. His voice, low and uneven, carried farther than he meant. I've seen that before long ago. Men who moved like that didn't fight to win points. They moved to end danger. Quick, clean, without noise. His eyes fixed on Thomas, and his lips pressed into a line, as though memory itself weighed too heavy to share. Ryan, his face flushed red, tried again. His pride, wounded deeper than his body, wouldn't let him stop. He lunged, but slower this time, as though testing a current he no longer trusted. He reached for Thomas's shoulder, desperation flickering in his eyes. Thomas turned barely at all. A pivot, a fraction of movement. Ryan's arm slipped past empty space, and before he understood what had happened, Thomas's hand rested lightly on the back of his neck. Not pushing, not striking, just a touch. And Ryan froze. Completely. The moment stretched long. Everyone could see it. The way that single placement carried more power than a strike ever could. Ryan's knees bent without command, his shoulders sagging, his head lowering. He stepped back on his own, eyes wide. Chest hammering with fear, he tried desperately to hide. The gym was utterly silent. Even Master Alvarez, usually composed, leaned forward now, his jaw set tight. He spoke finally, his voice quiet but firm. That is not the movement of a student. He paused, eyes narrowing on Thomas. That is the movement of a man who carries something the rest of us will never know. Thomas lifted his gaze to meet Alvarez's. A look passed between them, solemn, heavy, filled with things neither would say aloud. He did not answer. He didn't need to. Ryan lowered his eyes, his pride crumbling. For the first time, he looked small, and the silence of the room deepened, not of confusion now, but of respect unspoken. Ryan stood frozen in place, his eyes locked on Thomas's hand that had rested on him only seconds ago. Though Thomas had already stepped back, the weight of that quiet touch lingered. His pride, his certainty, all of it seemed to collapse inward. The younger man's breath came shallow, his chest tight. He knew what everyone else was beginning to realize. This wasn't about strength or speed. It was about something deeper. The crowd leaned forward as one, holding their breath. Not a whisper now, not a shuffle of shoes against the floor. The only sound was Ryan's heavy breathing and the quiet rhythm of Thomas's controlled inhale, steady, calm, unbroken. Ryan's eyes flickered with anger one last time, though it was weaker now, desperation replacing arrogance. He clenched his fists and rushed again, throwing a wild strike toward Thomas's jaw. The crowd gasped. It was the kind of reckless swing born from humiliation, not discipline. Thomas moved. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. His body shifted in a single smooth motion, almost like water running downhill. He stepped into the strike, not away, and with one precise movement, he redirected Ryan's arm, caught his balance, and guided him downward. The thud of Ryan's back hitting the mat was sharp, but not brutal, a sound that snapped through the gym like the crack of a gunshot. Then silence. Thomas did not press further. He didn't pin Ryan or strike him. He simply stood over him, composed, his presence filling the space more powerfully than any finishing blow ever could. His hands stayed loose at his sides. His breathing was calm. It was over, and everyone knew it. Ryan lay staring up at the ceiling, his eyes glassy with shock. He had no fight left. The certainty of defeat had reached him at last. A murmur rippled through the gym. It was different now, lower, reverent, heavy with the weight of recognition. People glanced at one another, searching for answers, but none spoke them aloud. They knew, instinctively, that they had just witnessed something far beyond sport. Master Alvarez rose from his chair, his hands pressed firmly on his knees as if steadying himself. His face, stern and unreadable for so long, now carried something else, respect, mixed with unease. "Enough," he said softly, but with finality. "It's finished." Thomas gave a single nod. No bow, no words. He simply stepped back, his presence still commanding, yet quiet as ever. The silence in the room thickened. Everyone stared. Everyone understood. Something extraordinary had just happened. And Ryan, trembling, finally sat up, his arrogance stripped, his eyes wide with something new. Respect. For a long while, no one moved. The sound of Ryan's ragged breathing and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above were all that filled the gym. Thomas remained where he was, standing tall but unassuming, his hands folded loosely in front of him. His calmness was almost unnerving, as though nothing significant had happened. Yet the air carried a weight that pressed down on everyone present. Harold, the old man with the cane, finally shifted in his chair. His hands trembled as he leaned forward, eyes locked on Thomas. He had been quiet most of the evening, but now his voice broke through the silence. It was low at first, uncertain, as though he feared the sound of the truth he was about to speak. "My God," Harold whispered, his cane tapping lightly against the wooden floor. "I know you." Every head turned toward him. Ryan froze where he sat on the mat, his eyes darting between Harold and Thomas. Harold's lips pressed tight, his jaw trembling with the effort to continue. "I was stationed in Kandahar. 1989. I saw your name on reports, saw the aftermath of things most men couldn't even speak of." His eyes shone with a mixture of fear and awe. "You were the one they called in when no one else came back." The words cut through the gym like a blade. Several students blinked, confused, but others, older men, veterans in the crowd, straightened in their seats. Recognition lit their faces. Murmurs spread again, but these were different now, hushed with reverence. "That's Thomas Hale," Harold continued, his voice breaking as he spoke the name. "Commander Thomas Hale, Delta Force, Ghost of the Valley." Gasps broke the silence. Even Alvarez's face shifted, his composure faltering. He looked sharply at Thomas, searching his eyes, and found no denial there. Only the quiet acceptance of a man who had carried too much for too long. Ryan, pale and shaking, lowered his head. His arrogance, his mockery, every sharp word from earlier now rang hollow in his ears. He tried to form words, but none came. His lips moved uselessly before he bowed his head, his pride shattered. "Sir," he managed at last, voice faint. "I didn't know." Thomas said nothing. His expression remained steady, calm, unflinching. The silence that followed was deeper than before. Not fear, not confusion, respect. The crowd now understood who stood among them, and no one dared to speak further. The next morning, the gym felt different. The mats were the same. The air still smelled faintly of sweat and polish. But something invisible lingered, an imprint left behind by the night before. Students entered quietly, their voices lower, their movements more deliberate. Even the most excitable ones seemed subdued, as if the place itself had absorbed a lesson. Ryan was there early. He swept the floor, something he had never volunteered to do before. His movements were slower than usual, more careful. His eyes, once full of pride, now carried a kind of humility, a weight that hadn't been there before. He paused often, glancing toward the door, as if waiting for Thomas to return. But Thomas did not come. Master Alvarez had asked him, quietly, if he might consider teaching. Just a class, or even a single lesson. Thomas had only shaken his head. "I've taught enough in my life," he'd said, his tone soft, final. Alvarez hadn't pressed. 3 weeks passed. The gym carried on, but Thomas's presence was felt in small ways. A few students stood straighter now. They took longer pauses before striking. They thought before acting. Even Ryan changed, slower to boast, quicker to listen. Some of the younger men noticed the silver dog tag that now hung at the gym's wall, fixed carefully above the entrance. No one touched it. No one dared. But every person who passed beneath it felt its weight. Harold returned often, sitting in his chair at the edge of the mat. He never explained why. Some days he only watched, his cane resting across his knees, eyes far away. Other days, he smiled faintly, as if remembering a truth that only men of a certain age carried in their bones. Thomas himself was rarely seen again. Sometimes, late at night, someone would glimpse him walking past the gym, hands in his jacket pockets, his steps steady and unhurried. He never stopped. He never waved. He was a shadow that had moved on, leaving behind something larger than himself. For Ryan, the memory of that night remained a scar, not a wound of shame, but a mark of change. He had touched arrogance and been humbled by a hand that carried wars within it. That memory guided him, shaping every word, every movement, every breath on the mat. And for those who were there, they carried the story quietly. A story of a man who revealed nothing until the world forced him to. A man who fought not to win, but to remind. And so the gym stood, humbled, sharpened, changed. The dog tag above the door gleamed faintly in the light, a silent truth left behind by Thomas Hale. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive stories.